Get off my lawn.
Bless.
Frankie Man Collectibles YouTube channel. My name is Blake. I'm here with Stefan.
Hello, that's me, and I like faithless looting.
And confirm. So, I want to get started with a little question. I'd like to pose a question to you because I know that you've been a victim of this crime before. So, have you ever had a deck that you loved that made the deck unplayable? Has that?
I will answer this question by telling you why I'm not playing Pioneer right now. And it's that I played Wynota when it was a meme deck and played it up until it got very, very good. And then, as with anything approaching the zenith of its power, was unjustly ejected into the ether. And is no longer a playable deck. The Wynota without Wynota is not a good deck.
No wrong.
No, she did a lot of wrong actually. That deck was messed up. That was a really powerful deck that was very hard to play against and very hard to beat.
Yeah, so things that tend to like produce a whole bunch of mana in a single turn cycle are typically pretty problematic for 60 card formats.
They tend to be for any format.
Yeah, if you haven't figured that out already, that's the topic for today. We're going to talk about banned cards, not specific banned cards, but the act of banning cards. So the first question is why does banning cards work?
That's an excellent question. And it works because it removes a problematic element from any format from the game. It takes, and that is to say, the governing body of any format reviews the format and decides if any one card is problematic in power level or in gameplay, and then excises that like removing a tumor.
Sure, that's a very eloquent that's a very eloquent comparison. So, cards works because when you have a problematic play pattern that's caused by a specific card, the easiest way to open up the format, as it were, for other things to be able to be played is to that thing. So when you get rid of it, when you take away that problematic play pattern, then your format can redevelop. It can reestablish itself, and
ideally,
and it can grow, because when you have these problematic, and basically every format, what tends to happen is that people gravitate towards those, right? Because the goal here is always has been and always will be to win the game. No matter what format you're playing, I think that there is always that carnal instinct to want to win the game, whether you're playing casually and just trying to enjoy yourself, even if to have fun, you still get that little endorphin rush, right?
Yeah,
when you
absolutely.
win the game, when you're able to take it down.
I would say the other part of not just unhealthy play patterns, but also unhealthy deck building can happen in formats where, thinking back to Hogak, when decks that were playing against Hogak, or even Hogak decks, were playing Leyline of the Void main deck. We're playing 3 copies of Leyline of the Void main deck, which is largely a sideboard card, and a niche sideboard card at that. That is when I think deck becomes problematic. When you have to run cards in your sideboard or even your main board that have no other purpose but to fight that one. Yeah.
That's actually a really good point, not something that I had considered. So, like, the recent expressive iteration ban from Legacy.
Yeah, different.
Well, you know, a lot of the decks that had red were playing Pyroblast in their main deck.
Mm-hmm.
And Pyroblast not only of iteration, the problematic card, but it also deals with many of the threats that those decks
Yeah,
are playing. So
absolutely.
a card that is typically a sideboard card all of a sudden becomes this main deckable kind of catch-all
Mm-hmm.
answer, and it gets rid of their value engine, it gets rid of their win condition, and that kind of really lines up with that. That's interesting.
Yeah. And those should not be main board cards. You should never be running a main board Pyroblast. They're great sideboard cards if, you know, you get a 3 of in the sideboard to bring in game 2 and 3. If a deck starts main boarding those cards, there's a problem with your meta, because you're getting to what is it? There's too much singularity around a single deck type. That,
and that's another thing is I think that's actually a really big thing is that you know, diversity. It's something that they constantly talk about. You know, when it always comes down to deck diversity. You know, this deck makes up 55% of the format, and it's got a 62% win percentage, and you know, in order to diversify the format, we're banning X card, you know, so that we can open up the avenues for these other cards to, you know, for these other, you know, gameplay patterns to.
I will say, there is another avenue, which is not just diversity. There is power, obviously, and there are some cards that need to be banned exclusively for power level. They are played minimally, but the people that play them start taking down tournaments at an alarming rate, like with Clan Ironworks, where it was maybe 3 people that could play that deck, but they were taking down double-digit tournaments every year with that deck.
Yeah,
and that's a problem.
Yeah. Yep, and that kind of goes back to the Winota thing. Is these cards that give you the ability to produce many mana on the same turn. Really, in formats where, you know, you're not normally able to produce tons of mana on the same turn, and even without the combo aspect that Clan's Ironworks provided, you know, going to Eye of Ugin, that card had the ability in that Eldrazi deck to produce 2, 4, 6, 8 mana a turn without ever even having to tap.
Yeah, that was both the power level and the deck diversity issue all in one. That Eldrazi Winter, watching that Pro Tour was a sight.
I mean, you know, LSV got there with a gut shot, which was probably one of my top 3 favorite Pro Tour moments of all time. That gut shot, absolutely insane.
Gut shot you? Ugh. Love it.
So the next question is, why does banning cards not work?
Ooh, this is a tough one. So right off the bat, people will leave formats if their deck is something they're committed to and it's something they enjoy playing, and there's no equivalent of that deck any longer. People will wash their hands of format and walk away. And it's happened to a lot of players in lots of different formats where they're done. They will not play that format anymore.
Yep. Start to associate your Magic identity with a card or with a specific subset of cards. And you really, really enjoy playing. Sudden, you can't play them anymore. To go play something else, like maybe a different format where you can play that.
Yep.
Or to, you know, try to find something that's very similar. And in the case of cards like Winota specifically, there's nothing really else that does that.
No. The play patterns were extremely
unique. You know, that goes back to what you were saying about, you played Winota, and you did basically from the very first day that you know, she came out. I don't know. I don't think she was out when Pioneer came out, but she was introduced
No.
shortly after the format,
It,
was
yeah.
created, and you really gravitated towards that card, and it's a really really cool play pattern, and you picked it up immediately, and then when she, well, I mean, I can't play this deck anymore. There's not something that's super duper close to this, so
It
bye.
it was also financially,
That plays a big role in it too.
yeah, unfortunately, cards are worth what they're worth. And while it didn't cost me a lot of money, because like I said, I played Wynota when it was a meme, there are a lot of people who bought in when it was very expensive and then
And
effectively
yeah, your
lost a
cards
ton of
get
money.
banned, and when cards like that get banned, what happens to the value? It goes down. So it's not like you can just, okay, well, Winota can't be played in this format anymore, so I can just trade my Winotas and get a different deck. Well, your
Yeah.
Winota's not worth anything anymore because the only format that it was good in isn't played anymore. So something about this that I also wanted to touch on is standard a very very long time ago when the original Mirrodin block was around.
Oh yeah.
That standard format was extremely toxic. It was very
Oh yeah.
parasitic, and what happened was R&D or WotC decided to ban a whole swath of cards at once. They didn't just take Ravager out. They took all of the artifact lands, they took
Yep.
Skull Clamp, and
Yep.
they took Disciple of the Vault all out at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So that is kind of an Eldrazi winter situation where
Yeah.
that was really the only deck that you could play. There was a number of other decks that like you could play if you really wanted to.
You pretended they
But
were good.
generally, they did not compare in power level to the
No.
Earthbound Ravager deck. And what happens when you ban that whole swath of cards is, so you have these people that are leaving now because this deck is gross, right? They're like,
Yeah.
I don't want to play against that all the time. I want to play, something that's different, and I don't feel like I can win any games because it's a problematic play pattern, and,
Yep.
I only feel like I can win a game if I play Ravager, and I don't want to play Ravager, so I'm going to go play something else. Then you
Yep.
ban it all, and now all the people that were playing that and loved it are like, okay, well, I'm not going to play now anymore either.
Yep.
It's really just a lose-lose situation. Like, you can't possibly win.
Yeah, the best thing for Wizards to do is to not print a bunch of overpowered junk into standard, I think is what we're getting at. Yeah, you sort of, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Like you're going
It's
to either
absolutely a
alienate
lose-lose
half of your
situation.
half or half, right? And it's the same for sort of the Cobblade where they chose not to ban the problematic deck, and people just had to wait for it to rotate. So it's sort of the opposite end of the coin there, or the Coco, like when Collected Company was in standard. It's the other end of the coin where they chose not to ban it because they didn't want to have a banned card in standard, and it created a really bad environment.
It's like, there are definitely situations where banning something based on power level is the correct thing to do. Banning something based on diversity is the correct thing to do. But whether you do decide to or decide against banning that thing, I think the effects of that specific ban are never perfect. It's
No.
never going to be 100% kind of situation.
No.
It's like 70-30 at best, and at worst, swing in the other direction 70-30. But generally, I think it's probably going to be a 50-50 situation.
Yeah.
I would not ever want to be one of those people that has to sit down and analyze and make the decision whether or not to ban a card in a format. And I do
No.
not blame anybody, for taking their time with a decision like that. There's always some talk of we should ban this in whatever format, and that there's constant discourse about that kind of thing, and I would not make
No.
that choice, because no
No.
matter what you do, you're gonna piss somebody off. No matter
Yeah,
what.
I'll ride on your boat. I don't want to captain that ship.
Yeah, absolutely not. So mad respect to them. So Nick's
Sure.
if not then what?
If not banned, then what? And
If not banned, then what? Because I think that there are a lot of ways that you can creatively approach without having to ban cards specifically. And the first thing that you can do is restrict those cards.
underutilized.
So I have been baffled for years that restricting cards to, normally you can play 4 copies of a card in a 60 card format. Restricting cards down to 1 copy only exists in Vintage. And it has always baffled me for years and years and years that Vintage is the only format where they choose to restrict a card as opposed to banning it.
It sort of doesn't make any sense, right? Like
other TCGs where that is normal.
Yeah, absolutely.
They will restrict a card before they ban it.
Yeah, or they make it like harder to play the cards.
I think there's a lot of cards that the reason that they're so powerful is because you get the consistency of having 4 copies of that card in your deck. In a format like Vintage, you have access to every tutor that's ever been printed. So, playing 1 of a card, it's not really an issue because you can play 6, 7, 8, however many tutors you want. They can go find that 1 card, and if it's so powerful and it does everything on its own, other formats don't have that power. Formats like Modern, they don't have access to all the tutors that Legacy and Vintage has. Pioneer, same case. Standard, same case. I am baffled that restricting before banning isn't even a consideration.
There's also, and I don't think we've touched on it, and I don't think people talk about it much, but there's this concept of what restriction means. And in Vintage, restriction means you only get 1 copy. However, there is an avenue that could be approached where saying instead of 4 copies, you can only play 2 copies, or 3 copies. You can actively meter down that power level without banning the whole card and saying, you get 3 copies of this, 2 copies of this, and then your deck becomes sort of an engine to find that card, and it really reduces the consistency and the power level, because the two branches of any format's power is raw power in card and consistency. Those are the 2 branches of what a format is made of. So it's raw power in the card selection, and it's consistency in finding those cards and executing the plan.
Yeah.
And by restricting things down, we can limit the power level by limiting the consistency.
Another thing to consider is that some cards don't have the power level when you don't have 4 of them. Of that card for it to do anything. If you were only allowed 1 copy of that card, it wouldn't do anything.
Correct.
So another thing that Wizards has been exploring recently is functional errata.
This is a frustrating thing.
It is a frustrating thing, and full transparency, from the eyes of a new player, a functional errata is basically non-existent, right?
Yeah.
If you're just getting into the game, you're opening up packs, you're reading cards for the words that are printed on them, and you're expecting them to do that specific thing. So you put them in your deck, and then you walk into a game store and you sit down and play a game with somebody, and that person is the first person to inform you that card does not, in fact, do what it says that it does. You might not ever...
I think that would be a worse experience than that person telling you the card is banned. If they were just like, oh, that card's too powerful in this format, it just can't be played, you'd go, okay, I understand that. But them telling you that, oh, they changed the text of that card because companions were too powerful to cast from your sideboard, and you go, wait, they changed it? And they're like, oh, yeah, they changed it. There is a single printing of one of the companions that shows the correct text, but the rest of them are wrong.
Yep.
And I think they're printing updated versions.
Is kind of the hallmark example of this.
Yeah.
So that mechanic came out, and immediately I was like, this is amazing. not because of power level concerns, but because something that is it has been and will always be one of the most frustrating things about being Magic player is mulliganing.
Mm-hmm.
Mulliganing is miserable.
Right.
And the companion mechanic does so much to fix that. It's very outside of the box. I think that it was pure genius. You know, as soon as I read it, I was like, this is amazing. This is a really,
Yeah.
really cool design space. That being said, those cards were very problematic.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that I think that they didn't go far enough with deck restrictions. And it's that classic Wizards thing where they're trying a new thing and they really want it to be good and they really want people to play it. So they kind of push the power level up a little bit and they push it up a little too high, which is forgivable. I understand that. And I'm totally okay with the bannings that have happened. I'm less okay with the way that it functions, with the way that they've updated the printing on it. I like that they changed it. I think it is a better version of what it is now.
Yeah.
That said, it still sort of stinks. Like there's no getting around it.
Very, very good thing for smoothing out those mulligans. There's this balance between, okay, you have this subset of deck building restrictions that you have to follow, and in doing so you basically get to always know that you will have that card in your hand when you need it. And you know, adding the text of 3 generic mana, you can put this card into your hand. I think that's a really good fix for what they did. But going back to what you said before, I think that they needed to be a little bit more stricter with the deck building restrictions. There's a number of different things that they could have done. We were talking about this a little bit ago, and you brought up Vanguards.
Oh, baby. If they had just made these Vanguards, I think people would have, like, old players would have clocked them immediately. They would have been like, oh, this modifies your starting hand and your life total, and it has an effect. And that effect is basically, so if nobody's ever seen a Vanguard card, it's sort of these older cards. They exist on Magic Online now. Momir Vig is the most popular of them because it has a format named after it. But the old ones were sort of distributed via, like, Inquest magazine had some. And effectively, there was a proto-commander format where you played a multiplayer game and everybody had a Vanguard that represented the deck. And the Vanguard was like Urza or Mishra or Miri, a lot of the Weather-like crew. And it had an increase or decrease in starting and maximum hand size, had an increase in starting life total, and it had an ability on it. And some of that ability was Gerard Capuchin, for example. Your starting life total was, I think, 3 higher. Your starting hand size was 4 less. So your opening hand was 3 cards, but every draw step you drew 2 cards.
Insane ability.
It's fantastic. And it exists in the command zone, can't be interacted with. It's just part of what your deck is.
Yep. So basically what you're saying is, you know, take that companion restriction a step further. You know, instead of Giganta, for example, instead of, you know, you're not allowed double pips in any of your card CMCs. You know, maybe add an additional, your starting life total is now 15 instead of 20, or your starting hand size is now 6 instead of 7. You know,
totally
take
reasonable.
It a little bit further and just add another layer on top of it. And you know, if you combine something like that with, you know, the 3 generic mana that you need to put it into your hand, I think that you end up with a very, very playable product. And I really hope that they do revisit the companion thing, because I think I think it's great.
It is,
and it just adds another dimension, another element to the game that, you know, I think is altogether net positive, even though we have had a bad experience.
Yep. I don't believe in my heart that they've abandoned it, and I think in 5-6 years we're probably going to see another iteration on it, and it'll be better. That being said, the cards that they did ban probably deserved it.
Oh no, absolutely, yeah, for sure.
And those are the kind of cards that you can't restrict, right? Unfortunately, there is no way to restrict those.
Right, because you only need 1 copy in your sideboard. That's all that you need.
So we've talked about banning. We've talked about
well, another thing that they've been doing with functional errata exists only in Arena.
Oh my god.
So the alchemy power adjustments, you know, when a card is over or underperforming, they have the ability to just change the code.
Yep.
Right. So two good things about this is it's on Arena, so you know you don't remember what the Oracle text says now.
Right. It just does it.
It just says it on the card. You can just read it. And
Right.
the other thing is you know, not only does it give them the ability to take a card down a notch, but it also gives you the ability to take a card up a notch. Like, well, we want to see this
Yep.
card perform a little better. But, you know, we thought that it was a little bit better, so you know, we can adjust it.
Yeah, and I, as the digital portion of the card game, I appreciate that. I
Yep.
do appreciate that they have the ability to tweak power levels on the fly to sort of fine tune it, and they can utilize that for future card development.
Yeah. And I think that's what it's all about, is that learning curve. Like, let's
Yeah.
get this right the first time,
Yeah.
so that we don't have to do this again in the future.
My concern, though, is people that play both digital and paper Magic, coming from Arena and playing at an FNM. And we talked about this before, where it's a bad experience when you come in and they say, hey, your card doesn't do what it says in the card. It's sort of a similar experience where you get used to what a card does on Arena. That is, the stats are different in some measurable way. And it would be exciting if the card is better in paper, like Essica's Chariot.
It's not, yeah,
but it's generally not.
Only exists on Arena. No, you're totally right about that. But there are a lot of examples where large swaths of cards have been errated all at the same time. You know, when they've created a new creature type.
Yeah.
You know, they've went back and retroactively changed the creature type on many creatures that have already been printed before. There's tons of cards, you know, like some of those old Legends in the Dark cards where you needed a flow chart to understand what the card does.
Chains of Mephistopheles.
Yeah. Or, for example, Oubliette.
Yeah.
Oubliette just phasing now. There's plenty of examples where they have errated cards.
I'm comfortable with that. I think that errating cards just do fit on a text box so that you don't run into the animate dead problem. I appreciate that. It's totally fine with those old cards when you're doing a reprint to make them slightly different functionally, but sort of approach the game and do the same thing. Although there are a couple cards that care about it in a different way. But yeah, it's that I can appreciate. Like, I play a lot of vintage cards, like in Dredge. I play a lot of like Graveyard Order Matters cards that I sort of have to know the Oracle text of by heart, because the way that the rules used to function and function now are very different. I don't think I would like to see reprints of these cards that have the correct text on them.
Text on them, so that the card in your deck does what it says it does.
Annoyingly, they did do that, but it's printed in a $1,000 box of 4 packs for some of these cards.
We're not even going to talk about that right now. So we have talked about errata. We have talked about restricting cards versus banning them.
Mm-hmm.
There is another very, very creative way to deal with a ban list, and my personal opinion is that, well, first of all, whoever it was that, you know, sat down and was like, hey guys, I have an idea. I don't know which one of those guys it was specifically, or if it was all of them working together.
So
he should get an award. Second of all, this should be adopted into other formats.
Agreed.
Because as you may or may not know, Stefan and I and our community play almost exclusively Canadian Highlander.
Yeah, we play a lot of it.
So Canadian Highlander uses a...
Yeah. We have
Instead
no ban
of
card.
banning a card that is powerful or problematic is assigned a point value.
Mm-hmm.
And your 100 card singleton deck can only contain 10 total points.
Yeah.
There are no ban cards outside of anti-conspiracy and things that depict you know
Problematic issues.
themes
Yeah.
or artwork and things like that. Yeah, get rid of those. But of the things that you typically see in other formats that are banned, like Moxen, like Ancestral Recall,
Very good card.
like Survival of the Fittest, cards that have been very problematic in the past, they're assigned a point value.
Yeah.
So this is the perfect fix.
For Singleton, I think it works the absolute best. It Also, I believe Robin Sorensen was one of the progenitors of the format, and he has many awards already, so we don't need to give him any more. I believe it was Robin and Nelson Salahub and a couple other folks from Victoria, BC. If you're watching this now, I don't know how you found me, but bless you. But it is sort of it's created, and we've talked about this, where consistency and power level drive the heart of a format. Well, the consistency of Canadian Highlander is already such that it is Singleton and it's 100 cards, and so the consistency is always going to be wishy-washy. But the power level you can go kind of ham on, which is why we kind of draw it back a little bit, and it turns into a much more balanced, a much more like, it feels good. It feels like you're never going to have a card banned. You're never going to lose a piece. And if there was anything that I could do to hand this idea, this beautiful concept for managing a format's power level to the commander like the commander group, the commander rules committee, to the three people, to the triumvirate of humans that could fit in my bathroom that manage the most popular format of Magic the Gathering. And I understand that there's like a commander rules advisory that's made up of a bunch of diverse individuals who help to advise this, but the actual individuals, the actual humans who manage the most popular format of Magic the Gathering is three. It's three people. And there's no explaining it to me. Like, Wizards of the Coast should have arrested control of this format long ago, because the ban list is inconsistent, and we talked about this. All right, the feel bads of banning a card, financial. When you have a card banned, it's suddenly you can't play it and you're out that money. It's the deck that you associate yourself with, and in Commander, it could be your commander.
Much more.
People will stop playing. They will just give up. And when Golos got banned, I know a lot of people that just, that was my favorite deck. I don't know what to do now. So we know the financial impact was there. We know that the emotional impact there. We know the social impact is there, where people will just, where there are a handful of people who will just ignore those rules, who will just continue playing the cards, and it makes for a confusing experience for a new player who is playing the most popular format of Magic the Gathering that is not managed by Wizards of the Coast.
So a couple of things, two things really, that the point system brings along with it. The first one is there is a transparency in power level.
Oh yeah.
So the points that are used in Canadian Highlander are assigned, based on public forum.
Yeah. So, we have a group discussion about it.
Yes, there's a Discord, and the committee that decides however the points are will say, hey, we're thinking about doing some power level adjustments. Community, please give us your suggestions. So everybody makes suggestions.
A committee who is voted in and out, who people cycle in and out of. This is not a lifetime appointment.
They take all of that data in, and they make the adjustments based on that. So it's a community-driven thing.
Yeah.
So there's a transparency in power level. Your deck gets 10 points. My deck has 10 points. Your deck has 10 points. Everybody's deck has 10 points. There are no, my deck's about a 7, or I just like to play casual. And I don't really think that card is very casual in what it's doing. There is no discussion of that. That card
Yeah.
is 7 points. It's 7 points in my deck. It's 7 points in your deck.
Yeah.
So there's a transparency and power level there. The other thing that the point system affords is customization. So if, say, the Commander format were to adopt a point system and they were to assign all of the ban cards point levels and maybe some cards that are not on the ban list their own point levels.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Demonic Tutor. Yeah.
Deck has 40 points, your deck has 40 points, 40, 40, 40, 40. Everybody's playing on the same power level.
Yeah.
There is no more discussion of it's about a 7. It's 40 points.
Yeah. This is honestly
0 points. It's customizable. Do you know how many games there are that use points?
Warhammer.
40K.
Yep.
Prime example.
Yeah. There's
Guys,
a lot of
how
those.
many points are we playing? Okay, we agree. My army's that many points. Your army's that many points. We're balanced.
Yeah, exactly. I will say it doesn't function as well in 60 card formats. It's much harder to meter power level on multiple versions of cards.
I would like to see more restriction. I think the takeaway for 60 card formats is I would like to see more restriction, less ban.
Agreed.
You can play 1.
Let me play 2 Winota. Give me 2. Or 1. Listen, it's fine. I'll play Eldritch Evolution.
Now you need a card and a card to sacrifice for it to go find it.
Yep.
In addition to you need it to live. Or more exploration of restriction in 60 card formats.
Yeah.
And more customizable point systems where we can all agree on a power level and there won't be any discussions. Like, literally, you know, it's really hard to sit down at a table with a bunch of randos and have a Rule 0 discussion where everybody's concept of what's happening is different. And I know everybody wants to have fun, and in a perfect situation we do, but it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah, especially if we're
the transparency of a point system, I think, is much cleaner than a ban list. Because nobody agrees on the ban cards.
Yeah.
Whether they are or aren't banned, nobody agrees on them. Everybody has their own opinions.
Yeah.
And then you run into situations where, you know, people don't agree with rule systems, people don't agree with bans, and so they're like, well, I mean, I'm going to play this card anyway, even though it's on the ban list, because this is a Rule 0 game. It makes no sense.
Yeah. And again, we return to those people that are new to the game, where they're learning about what a Rule 0 discussion is, where that appears nowhere in any of the documentation or rules for playing Commander or playing Magic the Gathering. Like, what is a Rule 0 conversation? Well, we kind of talk about it before we play. And in addition to that, we're seeing more and more of these large-scale, nationwide command fests where not just sitting down across the table from a couple of randos, you're in a building with randos, all there to play Commander, all with a different interpretation of what a 7 is. Give me consistency. Give me transparency.
Yeah.
So, takeaway.
I mean, that's it as far as the questions go.
Yeah.
That's it. We got to the point.
I think banning is sort of a necessary evil of managing a game like this, a very large game, a very complicated game. But I think there is and I think you agree here, there's a level of nuance that feels like it's being ignored. And I hope that in the future, Wizards of the Coast and to a lesser extent, the Commander Rules Committee, for whatever that means at any given time, embraces some more of the nuanced menial level adjustments of power levels to allow for transparency and customization that we'd like to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I don't want to be that guy I am not qualified to be that guy.
No.
I am not out here saying something should or should not be banned. I'm just saying that I think Canadian Highlander is the best singleton 100 card format.
Yeah, that I agree with. Come at me.
And card behind him. I do not, but we are the Magic Dads, and we're proud of you. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the Old Cranky Man YouTube channel. Make sure you turn that notification button on so that we get to annoy you every time we upload a video. And we'll catch you guys next time.
Night, night.
Bye.